Content warning, accents, including a couple of new ones. Chapter 20. In that supremely awkward moment, Spindle came to the rescue. "Right," he said, apparently unfazed by the fact that the ruler of our entire city was weeping in front of us. "If I grab this arm and you grab that arm, Mum, I think we can get her out." The Duchess, to her credit, put down her book, gave a quick, hitching sob, and grabbed my left arm. They called. I popped out of the toilet with long red scrapes across both hips and tumbled headfirst onto the carpet. The gingerbread man dove out of the way. The carpet probably came off worst in the encounter. "Oh, no, dear." The Duchess found a towel and draped it over my shoulders. It was the softest towel I have ever encountered. Thick and fluffy, and it seemed criminal to use it to scrub stuff off my skin, but I did it anyway. Hopefully they could launder it or something. Thank you, Your Grace." I tried to arrange the towel over my legs. Standing in front of the ruler of the city was one thing. Standing in front of her in your underwear was something else again. Although in truth, she didn't look much like a ruler right now. She looked smaller than she did in the parades and when I'd seen her in court. Smaller, older, a great deal more tired. When she walked, there was this faint hint of a shuffle, as if one of her knees pained her. There were dark purple half-moons under her eyes, and her brief tears had made her nose red and shiny. It was strange to think of the Duchess as old. She'd been middle-aged practically forever. I guess she must have been young once, but when you put Duchess in front of somebody's name, they sort of become permanently middle-aged, and she seemed, not unkind, maybe, but stern when I'd seen her before, competent, not like somebody who'd be crying in her bedroom and not knowing what to do. "Are the guards coming in?" I asked. I was hoping for more than a towel if they did. Soap and water before they arrested me, maybe. "No," the Duchess said firmly, dabbing at her eyes with the edge of her sleeve. "No, the guards are loyal to me at least, and they will not act without my orders. I wish I knew who else was." "We are, Your Grace." Spindle, never a staunch royalist, scuffed his foot on the carpet and muttered something. "Thank you, children," said the Duchess, "although I cannot think how I came to fall so far that my supporters must climb up the garderobe to pledge their loyalty." She took my towel absently and tossed it into a hamper. I tried to pull my shirt down over my legs, but she picked up a lap robe and handed it to me. "It'll get all dirty, Your Grace," I said, looking at the fine embroidery. "Then it will get dirty," she said firmly. "We have bigger things to worry about." "Could I looked longingly at the bathroom. I stank. I didn't want to ruin the lap robe, but I also didn't want to smell like a garderobe. "It'll only take a minute." Yes, of course." I pulled Spindle in with me and made him wash. He muttered, "This soap smells like roses." "Yeah, isn't it nice?" "No." I would have made him wash behind his ears, but we didn't have all night. I was half afraid that when we emerged, the Duchess would have called in armed men to deal with her visitors, but she was still sitting there, picking at a loose thread on the arm of her chair. She smiled a little when she saw us, but there was a lot of sadness underneath it. "Much better, my dears. Now, tell me about this assassin." So, Spindle and I, interrupting one another and talking over each other more often than not, explained about the Spring Green Man and the broadsheets and the curfew and the sudden disappearance of magic folk. I had to explain about Tibby. Spindle didn't say anything, but the Duchess reached out and took his hand in her own and squeezed. Her hands looked older than the rest of her. The tendons on the back stood out, and there was a white band of skin around one finger where a ring had been. "I did not know about the registration of magic folk," she said soberly. "I would not have allowed it." "There's posters up all over," said Spindle. The Duchess gave a short, bitter laugh. "I do not leave the palace much, my dears, and only then with guards." There is always so much to be done here, and we are not at war, but we are not far from it. And the council, Inquisitor Oberon, chief among them, tell me over and over again that I must not risk myself outside, that all it would take would be one madman with a knife to throw the city into disarray. She ran a hand through her hair. Without Ethan, the Golden General, here it has become easy to listen. So I have seen no posters, and I suspect that the people seeking an audience are being screened, so that no one with such upsetting information would reach me. But you wouldn't have allowed the registry, I said, feeling something unclench. It mattered to me a lot. When you're different, even just a little different, even in a way that people can't see, you like to know that people in power won't judge you for it. I would have tried to stop it. It has always been a great virtue of our kingdom that magicers are treated no differently than anyone else here. I would not see that end on my watch. She sighed. There are a great many things I would not wish to see on my watch, though, and perhaps it will not be my watch much longer, if Oberon has his way. Can't you stop him? I asked. Countermand the order? She sighed again and pinched the bridge of her nose wearily. It is not so simple. You must understand, Mona, the ruler of a city is not an absolute power. The council also wields a great deal of control. Usually that's a good thing. It keeps a bad ruler from making things unpleasant for the citizens, but it can also lead to problems, particularly if someone on the council has an agenda of their own. Oberon leads the council, and he is skilled at making other councillors see his way of thinking. But what does he want? I cried. What does he have against magicers? The Duchess paused. Odd as this may seem, Mona, I don't think he does have anything against them. At least nothing personally. I clenched my fists in the lap robe. Felt personal to me. What Oberon wants, what Oberon has always wanted, is power. She stared out the window, but I don't think she really saw it. He has long believed that we should be waging war on other city-states, using the power of our war wizards to bring as many of the cities as we can together under one ruler. Core, said Spindle. Does he want to be an emperor, like in the old days? More or less, said the Duchess, sighing. He wants the power, but he wants a figurehead on the throne. If the people are angry, it is me they will come after. Not Oberon. And the magicers, I said. A power he does not control, and so must be removed. He has a good idea of the strength of the army, but there are so many minor wizards in the city, and who knows what they might be capable of. Clearly, he's decided to force them out or kill them, if they will not leave. This is going to sound strange, but that actually made me feel a little better. Somehow, it's better to be a potential enemy than one of you people. At least you respect your enemies. Well, said the Duchess, at the moment, Oberon believes that I am unaware of much of what he does, and apparently he is right. He believes that I am a fool, and there is no need to act against a foolish old woman. The moment that I become dangerous, he will act to remove me. I gulped. It will happen. Sooner or later. She rose and began to pace through the room, still limping a little on her right knee. I am only convenient, so long as I am a figurehead. And even a foolish old woman, sooner or later, will protest at what she is asked to do. She closed one hand in a fist in the tapestry. I should have done so long before now. The blood of the magic folk is on my hands. Mona, Spindle, I am sorry. I didn't know what to say. Grown-ups don't usually apologize to kids, not about big stuff like this. When somebody says, I'm sorry, you say, it's okay. Except it wasn't. Tibby was dead. So were a lot of other people. Maybe she could have stopped it, but maybe she couldn't. And who was I, Mona the baker, a wizard who bred dough and cookies, to accept an apology on behalf of the dead? Apparently she didn't expect an answer, because all she did was drop her chin to her chest and lean against the doorframe for a moment. If only Lord Ethan were here, she said sadly. Sending the army out was a mistake, but what could I do? The Carrick's mercenaries are raiding the outer townships for supplies and livestock, at least so we have heard. And we cannot simply abandon those people to their fate. But Oberon is here and Lord Ethan is not. And I do not know if I am strong enough to stand against the Inquisitor and however many traitors he has rallied to his cause. Can't you get him back? Asked Spindle. Send him a message. Tell him to get back here double quick and throw Oberon out. There is a problem with that as well, she said. It takes a mage, a wizard like Mona, but specially trained to send a message quickly. Otherwise we must fall back on riders carrying messages, which will take days, and of the 3 wizards left stationed at the palace, one has died quite recently of natural causes. She stopped. I watched the knowledge cross her face that those causes had likely been unnatural. She took a deep breath and continued. One is very old, and I do not know if he has the strength to send such a message at all. And the third one? I asked, feeling cold. Only 3 mages. Only 2 mages if one had just died. The third, said the Duchess, I very much suspect, is the one you call the Spring Green Man. Hell yes. Chapter 21. Well, said Spindle, speaking for all of us, this is a right mess. The Spring Green Man. In the palace. Here. I squeezed my arms around myself tightly, feeling an urge to make myself as small and inconspicuous as possible. What if he could smell me already? What if he'd smell me coming in through the scullery? He probably couldn't climb up the guardrobe, but he had to know what room it led to. What if it was outside the door right now? No. No. The guards would have said something. The guards were loyal, the Duchess had said. Assuming he hadn't killed them. Possibly reading my wide-eyed look of panic, the Duchess rose and went to the door. She opened it a crack and said softly, Anything going on? No, my lady, said a deep male voice from the other side. All is well. Thank you, said the Duchess. See that I am not disturbed. She closed the door again. This old wizard, said Spindle. How old we talking? Like old, or like senile and decrepit old? The Duchess raised an eyebrow. Well, fairly old. I don't know that he's senile, but he's definitely feeling his age. His loyalty, at least, is never in doubt. He was a dear friend of my father's. He'll have to do, I said. If the Spring Green Man is here in the actual palace, Your Grace, he would come for you and me, I thought, but I didn't want to say that out loud. I expected her to tell me that I was being silly, or that there was something else I hadn't thought of. You know, the sort of thing grown-ups tell you when you're absolutely positively sure of something that blows the whole thing out of the water and makes you feel like an idiot. But she didn't. Instead, she nodded and said, Yes, you're right. Let's go speak to him. Said Spindle, we're not exactly dressed for wandering around the palace with you, Mum. The Duchess smiled. It was a haggard sort of smile, but under the circumstances it was actually pretty good. Don't worry about that, young man. There are some advantages to being the Duchess. She opened the door. The guards snapped to attention. "Joshua," she said to the one on the left, "go and get me some Page's livery. 2 sets, 1 small, 1 large. If you can't get the shirts, at least get the tunics." "Your Grace?" said Joshua, looking a bit startled. "Now, Joshua." "Yes, Your Grace." Joshua left his post. The guard on the right, admirably blank-faced, moved to stand in front of the door. The Duchess closed the door again. "Might he tell somebody?" asked Spindle, puzzled. "I highly doubt that the Inquisitor is going to be woken in the middle of the night by news that I am requesting 2 Pages' uniforms." She ran a hand through her hair and paced around the room again. "If he's monitoring me that closely, we are probably already doomed." Spindle nodded, absently. His attention had been claimed by a plate of cheese and bread on a little side table. Mom? "Spindle!" I hissed, mortified. "We were here to prevent a bloody coup, not eat a midnight snack." "Help yourself," said the Duchess, amused. Spindle carved off a hunk of cheese and went to work. His table manners were mortifying. Also, now that I was aware that the cheese was there, I could smell it. Now, my appetite had shut down in self-defense during our ascent of the guard-robe, but there were some stirrings that indicated it wasn't quite gone. So I helped myself to some bread and cheese, and it was great cheese. The bread was pretty good, superior flour, very fine, a bit too dense where it wanted to be fluffy. I could have done great things with that flour. A few minutes later, the guard returned. He came into the room, carrying an armful of clothes, and stopped dead when he saw Spindle and me. "Your Grace?" "They're friends of mine," said the Duchess firmly. "I am making them royal pages." "But, Your Grace, we were on guard. How did that—" He sounded almost plaintive. "Through the guard-robe," said the Duchess, "which was ultimately a good thing, but nevertheless we shall have to have it looked at. Not everyone climbing up it may be so benign. I will come out and go back in." "Through the guard-robe," said the Duchess, "which was ultimately a good thing, but nevertheless we shall have to have it looked at. Not everyone climbing up it may be so benign. Yes, Your Grace, once." "Couple of extra crossbars ought to do it," Spindle piped up. "Spikes aren't worth much, but if you weld another set of crossbars, ain't nobody getting up but the rats." "Let us hope there will not be rats," said the Duchess firmly. "I accept that rats are a fact of life, but I am not overly fond of them. Now, children, let us get you into uniform." The uniforms fit. Sort of. My pants wouldn't button. Spindle thought that was hysterical, but his required a belt to hold up, which Joshua very kindly donated, and which went around Spindle's skinny waist twice before they could get it buckled. The tunics, however, were long and elegant and hid a multitude of sins. They couldn't hide Spindle's rolled cuffs or the fact that neither of us were wearing the right shoes, but hopefully nobody would be looking that closely. The gingerbread man, recognizing that we were in disguise, gripped the back of my collar and hid underneath my hair. "Very well," said the Duchess, surveying us. "No one is going to be looking that closely at this time of night, I hope. Let us go to Master Gildane's quarters." She flung a cloak over her shoulders. "Joshua, if you would." "Yes, Your Grace." Stepping into the castle hallway was almost as frightening as climbing into the guard-robe. The Spring Green Man was somewhere here. What if he came out for some reason? What if he had insomnia, or wanted something from the kitchen, or just felt like murdering a random page that was wandering around the hallways? The Duchess, however, had no such fears. She swept down the hall as if she owned it, which I suppose she did. Joshua followed behind her with his hand on his sword hilt, looking very warlike and protective. I wondered how much he knew about what was going on with the Inquisitor. Spindle and I scurried after them, and I was convinced that my shoes were leaving mud stains on the carpet, even though I couldn't see anything when I looked behind me. We turned and turned and turned again, went down a broad staircase and through a doorway. Joshua threw open another set of double doors and waved the Duchess through it with a little bow. Our eyes met when I was going through. He looked thoughtful and a little worried, but he didn't look mad. That was a relief. Now, said the Duchess as we entered a broad hallway lined with doors, which one is Master Galdane? Third on the right, Your Grace. Thank you. She approached the correct door and rapped on the wood with her knuckles. Nothing happened. For a bit. He is a bit deaf, Your Grace, said Joshua apologetically. If I may, please. Joshua pulled a knife. Both Spindle and I took a step back and hammered on the door with the pommel. Open up in the name of the Duchess! Well, really, murmured the Duchess. That seems a bit excessive. Very deaf, said Joshua, putting his knife away. Apparently Master Galdane was not quite as deaf as all that, because we heard a faint, I'm coming, and a moment later the door swung open a handspan. What's this all about then? Asked the wizard, sounding cranky. It's the middle of the bloody night. So late it's practically early. What are you doing pounding on an old man's door at this hour? Joshua pushed the door open, and Master Galdane took a step back. What? He said. Hey, you, show some respect, young fellow. I'll turn your blood into pickled herring. See if I don't. Master Galdane, said the Duchess warmly, the kingdom needs your help. The old wizard blinked at her. Oh, he said slowly. Oh, Your Grace. I had no idea. Come in, come in. He took a few steps back and flapped his hands at us. His chambers looked more like something you'd find in the rat's nest than inside the palace. There were things piled on other things, none of them terribly clear of purpose or definite in origin. There was a wing-back chair with a thing in it that looked like a cauldron made out of a crocodile, with a big glass fishbowl full of sludge where the footstool would be. Doors opened on every side, although the one in the far wall was only accessible by stepping over a jumble of what had probably been suitcases at some point in the distant past. Master Galdane looked around the room awkwardly. Oh dear. Will you come this way, Your Grace? I think the sitting room is, not so, The Duchess showed the sort of grace you expected from a monarch. Truly it is nothing, Master Galdane. We have come for your magical services, not your housekeeping skills. Magic, eh? Asked Galdane glumly. He pushed open the door to the sitting room. It was indeed better, although there were still stacks of books across the floor, and dust made a thick fur across the backs of the chairs. Should get young Elgar to do it. Not he's good for anything but air and smoke and smells. Young wizards today, no better than an edge wizard if you ask me, but still better than a senile old magicka. Not as young as I used to be, probably only make a hash of it. We have reason to suspect that Elgar is a traitor, said the Duchess, sweeping into the sitting room. Elgar. So the Spring Green Man had a name. I followed her, with Spindle close behind me. Joshua took up a post by the door. The Duchess settled into a chair and looked up at Master Galdane, who was looking old. Far older than he had a few moments ago, when we opened the door. And yet, when he spoke, there was no trace of querulousness in his voice. And it sounded stronger than I would have expected, coming from an old man. I see. So it has come to this, then. He met the Duchess's eyes. I do not know how much magic is left in me, Your Grace, but I served your father, and I served your father's father, and whatever I have left is yours to command. A significant D. Elgar, not Helga. Helga's incredibly loyal. Chapter 22. Less than an hour later, I was jammed into a closet with Master Galdane and a large bowl of water. You can't all fit in here, said the wizard when Joshua seemed inclined to argue. No, look, it's my working room. I go in there to talk to the waters, not entertain guests. My young colleague here can come with me. If you're worried, I'm going to summon up water demons to wash your bones clean, but the rest of you might as well stay in the sitting room. I can't watch the entrance to the working room and the Duchess at the same time, said Joshua. Not unless we all want to stand out in the hallway, and I don't think that would be a good idea. The Duchess told him that he could watch the door and she'd be fine by herself, and Joshua pretended that she hadn't said anything. That surprised me. I guess it was proof of what she'd said, that the ruler of a city didn't have absolute power. As far as Joshua was concerned, when it came to keeping the Duchess safe, he was in charge. And the Duchess seemed to accept this. She turned to me instead. Mona. I knew that wasn't an order. She was asking me if I was willing to do it, in case Master Gul'dan was also a traitor. I could have said no. We would have worked something out. I'll go, I said. I didn't believe that Gul'dan was a traitor. He'd listened to the entire story, and if he had been, he would have acted surprised when we told him about Elgar to divert suspicion. Instead, when we told him about the Spring Green Man, he only nodded. Sounds like Elgar, all right. Nasty young fellow, the sort that pulls wings off flies when he's bored. Always wearing those ridiculous bright green robes, too. You'd think he'd stick out like a sore thumb, but he's got that weird talent with air. Wraps it around himself so your eyes just slide off him half the time. Can you go and arrest him? Asked Spindle. He was eyeing Joshua's weapons with intense, perhaps professional, interest. Go chop him up for being a traitor. We can try, said Joshua. He looked at Master Gul'dan for confirmation. Try is the right word, young man. Elgar's not enough wizard to stop the breath in your lungs, but he'll get smoke in your eyes and tangle your brain, and after that he only needs a knife. Days when I could summon a rainstorm and wash the air clean for you are long behind me. Gul'dan glanced at the Duchess and sighed. But I'll do what I can, Your Grace, if you ask. Though I strongly suggest that we send a message to the Golden General first, so that if we fail, you aren't short a wizard. Then by all means, send your message, Master Gul'dan. The Duchess gave Joshua a quelling look. He looked as disappointed as Spindle, although he hid it better. Gul'dan himself was a master of water. This is one of the major differences between really good wizards and me. They've got access to big stuff like water or air or lightning. Being able to command any kind of water is a lot more useful than being able to command any kind of bread. He insisted on bringing out a teapot and teacups, although there hadn't been a fire in the fireplace in a very long time, judging by the state of the hearth. I busied myself wiping out the teacups with the edge of my tunic, while the wizard hunted for tea. When I started to say something about heating the water, however, he touched the teapot, and steam poured from the spout. Hot water for tea I can still manage, for all the good it does me. I can send a message, probably, but I wasn't lying, Your Grace. You'd be better off with nearly any other wizard in the kingdom besides me. Magic isn't what it used to be. There are no other wizards, said the Duchess. Oberon has seen to that. You and Mona are the only ones I can trust. The others are dead or fled or deeply in hiding. All rode away with the army weeks ago. She sighed and ran a hand through her greying hair. I have been a fool. I have been a fool for too long, Master Gul'dan, and now we are all paying the price. Ah, said Gul'dan, but is it safer to be a fool? Do you think I have not known that these last few months? No one bothers an old fool. He dropped his hands. Come, Mona. If we are the last wizards in the kingdom, let us see what we can do. When he put it like that, I had to go with him. Maybe we were the last wizards in the kingdom. You probably couldn't count knackering Molly. The odds that getting rid of Oberon would hinge on dead horses walking seemed pretty slim. But Master Gul'dan wasn't lying. There really wasn't room for everyone in the working room. Joshua and the Duchess and Spindle stayed in Gul'dan's suite just down the hall. Magical workrooms weren't connected directly to living quarters, in case the spells got loose. It made sense to me. If I lose control of my magic, the worst you get is bad bread. If Gul'dan lost control, you'd have a sheet of angry, intelligent, boiling water rampaging through the castle. Unlike the rest of his chambers, Gul'dan's workroom was completely bare, except for a padded stool and a large bowl of water sitting on top of an old wooden milk crate. The whole room was perhaps 5 paces long and 3 paces wide. I think it might have been a hall closet at one point, which would explain why it was right down the hall from his rooms. He sat on the stool with his back to the door. I squeezed myself around the other side of the bowl of water and sat on the floor. Right. Have you ever done any message work? Asked Gildane, stirring the pot with his finger. The question surprised me. I work with bread, sir. Just bread. He snorted, eyeing the gingerbread man sitting on my shoulder. And I work with water. Just water. I admit bread's a little bit more specialised, but I suspect you could work something out. Convince your message to appear on a scone or something. He frowned deep into the water and stirred it again. Come on, you. Wake up. I thought about it. I actually probably could convince a scone to burn in a specific pattern, like a word, but not at any great distance. Certainly not as far away as the army. I don't think I'm strong enough, I said. I'm not a very good wizard. There's no way I could reach the army's ovens. I wouldn't even know how. Ha! Master Gildane shook a finger at me. Neither could I, youngster. Doubt very many of us could. This bowl is the mate of a bowl the army's carrying with them, made by the same hand in the same hour, and the water in it was drawn up from the same well in the same bucket. I couldn't reach across the city, cold. The only reason I could send a message at all is because the water in the water. The only reason I could send a message at all is because the bowl and the water remember each other. He poked the water a third time and leaned back, apparently satisfied. All the message wizards have something like this. There's a man in a tent wherever the army's camped who has the bowl out and a stick of Elgar's incense and a tray of sand for poor Dalthil. He sighed. Although I suppose they've taken Dalthil's tray down now. Maybe not, I said. Elgar would have sent them the message that he was dead, right? Maybe he didn't. Maybe they don't know. Somehow that seemed likely to me. If things were coming to a head, would Oberon want the Golden General to know that the city was short a wizard? Gildane grunted. Ah. You may be right. Anyway, we could probably arrange a mated pair of ovens and dough from the same batch, and you could send messages that way. It'll be a little bit more awkward, but there's never enough wizards available, so people are always willing to find a workaround. I'm pretty sure I blushed. The army was probably the only place in the city that wanted more wizards, particularly now. Honestly, sir, I'm really not that much of a wizard. I mean, I bake stuff. It's nothing special. He made a rude noise. You've got your head stuffed full of stories about wizards smashing mountains and hurling fireballs. You're not that weak, youngster. Wizards have done more with less. It's bread, I said. oh, my life. Cassandra the assassin grew roses, he said, bending over the bowl. That was all she could work with. She convinced them to grow deadly poisons and sleeping powders in their pollen and to carry messages along their stems so that she could eavesdrop on her enemies. She nailed up a few people in rose thickets with thorns as long as your arm. There are a couple of kingdoms where they still won't grow roses within 100 yards of the palace or the army barracks just because of her, just in case, and she died 80 years ago. He tapped the side of the bowl with a fingernail. Mind you, I don't suggest that you want to follow in her footsteps, but with a little imagination... Ah, here we go. The water rippled and sloshed, and a tinny voice said, Gildane? Is that you? Don't sound so surprised, Agar. I'm not dead yet, not like poor Dalthil. I peered over the edge of the bowl of water. It showed two sets of reflections, like two panes of glass laying on top of each other. One was of Master Gildane, and the other was of a woman with frizzy blonde hair. Apparently, this was Hagar. Due to the angle, I could see directly up her nose. She frowned, which changed the view somewhat. Dalthil? What are you talking about? Gildane and I shared a long look over the top of the bowl of water. Listen to me, said Gildane. Dalthil's dead. Elgar's a traitor. Oberon's planning something. You have to get the army back here as soon as possible. Hagar's nostrils flared. I think she probably furrowed her brow too, but mostly it was just nostril from my angle. What? Elgar? Are you sure? Of course I'm bloody sure, nitwit! Gildane pounded on the milk crate with his fist, which sent ripples across the water and temporarily broke up Hagar's reflection. "The Duchess told me herself, you've got to do something." It was the ripples. The ripples distorted everything. The flicker of pale green that appeared behind him was too broken up for either of us to notice, until the spring green man put a knife into Master Gildane's back. Gildane gasped. It was a wet, unhappy sound. Through the water, faintly, I heard Hagar shriek. I jerked my head up and saw the spring green man, Elgar, pull the blade out of the old wizard's back. Time shuddered and juddered to a halt. We might have been a trio of statues, me and Gildane and the spring green man standing over us. All I could think for a moment was that the blade was clean. There was no blood on it. Surely that meant this was all a mistake. Gildane hadn't really just been stabbed. When people got stabbed, the knife was all bloody, wasn't it? Then Master Gildane slumped forward over the milk crate, and his breath rattled in his chest like nag's bones, and time started up again. "You again," Elgar said, looking down at me. "Stupid child. I lost your scent, and I thought you'd fled weeks ago. Coming here to the palace, right under my nose? I thought I'd puke from the smell of you." He shook his head. "I suppose the game is up now that I had to kill Gildane, but at least it lets me wrap up one more loose end." "Oh God," I thought. "Oh God, we're in the magic wing of the palace. Of course Elgar could smell us. He probably lives right down the hall. And everybody's so used to being in a palace, they didn't even think about it. Oh God, we actually thought that if we didn't knock on the door, he wouldn't know we were here." The room was too narrow. Elgar had come in through the only door, but now he had to come around one side of the milk crate or the other, but I couldn't get any further away. If I tried to bolt down the other side, he could just reach across the crate or knock it over and grab me. I was trapped. "I owe you anyway," snarled Elgar, "throwing your damned acid beast on me." It was then I noticed the shiny pink scars across the side of his face. Apparently, Bob had done some damage. A small, bitter satisfaction bloomed in my chest, inside the terror. Elgar took another step forward and pushed Master Gildane aside with his knee. I could smell that thick, spicy scent that I remembered from the first time he tried to kill me. My stomach churned. His feet didn't make any sound on the floor. It must have been more of his magic. If you can control air, maybe you can control the sound that moves through it. No wonder he'd been so good at sneaking up on people. I pressed myself flat against the back wall. The gingerbread man crouched on my shoulder, icing eyes narrowed. 2 more steps and he'd be on me. I'd have to do it, and have to try to bolt. There wasn't any other option. It wasn't going to work, and I knew it wasn't going to work, but the alternative was to stand there and be stabbed, and who wants that? Maybe if I could get to the door, I could yell a warning to the Duchess, and dear Lady of Sorrowful Angels, the Duchess! They were all in the sitting room, still. The spring green man must have snuck past the front door and gone for the working room, and meanwhile, the Duchess and Spindle were just sitting in the other room a few feet down the hallway, drinking tea and waiting, with only a thin wooden door and a single guard to protect them. I took a deep breath and I screamed as loud as I could. It didn't seem very loud. It seemed like a thin little wall. It seemed like a thin little wail. Elgar snorted and lifted his knife. From the bowl of water I heard Hagar crying, "What's happening? What's going on?" Master Gildane, with what had to be his very last strength, got a hand under the bowl of water and flipped it onto Elgar's legs. Elgar screamed much louder than I had. Whatever Master Gildane had said about his fading skills, I'll swear that water was boiling when it hit the spring green man. He scrabbled at his robes, hissing in pain, and I lunged for the door. I wanted to grab Master Gildane, but I wasn't strong enough to hold him out. As it was, I just tried not to step on him, and then the spring green man, half weeping from his burns, clubbed me in the back of the head with his elbow and knocked me down. I landed in a sprawl across Master Gildane. My head rang, and I knew that at pretty much any second there was going to be a knife stuck in me. The gingerbread man was thrown free and rolled, shedding bits of icing. "I'll kill you!" said Elgar, almost sobbing, stumbling as he turned towards me. I tried to crawl forward, away from him, but it was so slow, and the stupid page's pants were too small, and seemed to have my hips in a vice, and my left hand hurt where I landed on it, and Master Gildane was under me, and he wasn't breathing anymore, and I squeezed my eyes shut. It was going to be a cold, bright pain. I just knew it, and then I was going to die, and that would be the end of a bread wizard named Mona, who just happened to make really good sourdough and muffins, and not get messed up with assassins and politics, and there was a thud of impact. Something heavy hit me. It didn't feel like I had imagined the knife would feel, but it was definitely heavy, and it knocked the wind out of me, and I thought, maybe this is what being stabbed feels like. I thought, maybe you don't even feel it. It's just like something really heavy hitting you. "Mona!" said Spindle, sounding frantic. "Mona, get up! Come on, get up!" Spindle. I opened my eyes. Joshua dragged the green man off me. He had clubbed him over the head with a chair. I gulped air, trying to get that spicy, head-clogging smell out of my lungs. Except for a skinned palm where I tried to catch myself when I fell, I was unhurt. Master Gildane was dead. And that meant I was the last loyal wizard left in the palace. And that's where we'll leave it.